Good evening and welcome to Cepher Moments. I'm Stephen Pigeon, and we're talking about the topic tonight, to everything, to everything. I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of this ministry. And I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to this channel. Remember that if you want to chat during the course of this discussion, you need to subscribe to the channel. That helps me keep, shall we say, wayward chat coming in during the presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I recognize a lot of familiar faces in the chat tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a subscriber to this channel. And we want to give thanks also to, of course, Yahweh for blessing the Cepher Publishing Company and the work that we're doing with the Cepher Millennium Edition. As you know, there is pre-order is now available for the large print Cepher Millennium Edition in flexible binding, and it is on its way from the printer. Hopefully it will get here soon. But at any rate, we are taking pre-orders for that. We're looking forward to really a great product coming in. In addition to that, we have other things in the works that we hope to be offering new things on the website. The app is in the process of being upgraded for both the iPhone and the Android and Android-like ministries that we're going to be offering, because we've, obviously some of the protocol that's been coming out from the more advanced developers of the recent cell phones, which have become quite sophisticated, have required all kinds of new developments that have to be done to make our app work, particularly to maintain the functionality that currently exists. In other words, when your app updates, that thank you, Ashton, and thank you, Andrew Sims. When the app updates, you want to see that the app updates with your notes, for instance, and your bookmarks and so on and so forth. Plus, we want to have the same functionality with a robust search engine that searches across all of the books, all 87 books, and the application of the lexicon and so on and so forth, highlighting capability, all the things that you've come to expect from the Cepher app, and with a slightly new look. So that, by the way, is also in the works. We're finalizing the bugs where that is concerned. And so we're looking forward to all of that. Shalom, Stephanie Meeks Crow. Good to see you here. I'm glad you're here. And thank you for being a part of this ministry and Fiery Faith Ministries. I really appreciated your comments earlier, Fiery Faith Ministries, on the efficacy of the mask when we were talking about that during RFA today, Radio Free Alaska. Bear in mind that we have many aspects to the ministry going on from Cepher Publishing Group. Of course, we have the website, Cepher Publishing Group, where blogs are updated. All the videos that we make here on this channel are also archived on Cepher.net. And so some of the videos that have not reached the high appreciation level of some of the scrutinizers continue to be available at Cepher.net, as this video will also be available. In addition to that, Cepher Academy continues to offer a robust set of courses. We've just finished wrapping up advanced geography and American history up until the Revolution, and we are now going through just the Besserot, which is a study of the four Gospels in depth, and also empires, a study of the ancient empires found in the Old Testament, or Tanakh. And of course, we're also doing an additional study in the common law, primarily Blackstone's teaching on the common laws of England. And that is a very detailed and comprehensive class that's going to be going on until we completely exhaust the Blackstone teaching. If you want to join, you're welcome to join at any time. You can join any of the classes at any time. The Besserot, Empires, or Common Law, you can join at any time. That's through CepherAcademy.net. And in addition, there are numerous Telegram channels that are currently open. I have a channel called Radio Free Alaska, and I've been a little bit slow on the draw when it comes to Cepher Radio on Telegram. I'm supposed to be reading the Cepher. I have completed the reading of Genesis, but I'm going to pick up the reading again as soon as I get past this breakneck schedule that I'm currently on right now. I will be picking up the reading again. I may have to reschedule at a different time, however, that's going to be a little bit more convenient. And so that is going to pick up again. And also, you can catch me on Stephen Pigeon Chat on Telegram, Radio Free Alaska, of course. You just let me know if you want to join and use your full name, because I get a lot of spam people that come in there, and you'd have to be careful. I don't want to let, these, online prostitutes get on the channel. So I need to know who you are. And so then I can allow you to come into the channel. But RFA is doing quite well. There's also many Cepher groups, Cepher Australia, Cepher South Africa, Cepher Academy is online at Telegram. We also have the Cepher Pesach. We have another site set up for the coming Feast of Tabernacles, Cepher Holland, and the Feast of Tabernacles there. Plus the Eating Wild Honey and Locust channel, which is available also on Telegram. I think there's several channels on Telegram, and you can also reach them at their website. eWhale is a great partner for Cepher Publishing Group, and you can use affiliation codes through Jessica Knock to order your Cepher, and so you can use that. So contact Jessica if you want to bless her with that part of the ministry. And hey, I want to thank you, Tony Wright, for being a part of that. Tony says it'd take an eternity to catch up with the class on Cepher. Good job as we're heading into eternity. Yeah, okay, Tony. I got you. That's good. I like that. Yeah. And so anyway, all of these things are currently going on. And for all of you that are part of this ministry, I encourage you to take advantage of these things if you can. And like I say, we have the Cepher classes are, like for instance, in the Best Road class, when we do that class, we're digging into the details of the gospel. Like 2 weeks ago, we studied Judas Iscariot, for instance. And we find interesting things every week. And this, and 2 weeks ago, when we were looking at Judas Iscariot, one of the things that kind of came to mind was there's two different narratives for the death of Judas Iscariot. One is that he hanged himself, and the other is that his guts fell out in Potter's Field. Well, I thought that was the case until I took a good look. Oh, thank you, Andrea. I am pretty busy. But I took a good look at the passage in Acts talking about his guts falling out in Potter's Field. That's not talking about Judas's guts falling out in Potter's Field. It's talking about the chief priest that bought the property with the 30 pieces of silver that Judas had cast back to the elders. His guts fell out. Right. Yeah. And hey, Ashton, thanks for the tip on the common law class. It is a blast doing the common law because, in the common law class, we have been going through Blackstone, and I'll tell you, studying the English Bill of Rights in detail, for instance, natural rights and how they lay out the foundation of the common law and how it's really based on Torah and all of this kind of thing. Hey, Brady, I'm glad you're here. And James Hilly, glad to see you. And of course, Andrea Sims, just a blessing to have you here. Pamela Garcia. And of course, Stephanie Cromeeks, Joshua, Richard Sibley, Judy Keel. Blessings to you, Judy. May your healing come quickly. Barbara Button and Julia Wake. Yes, all of that. And at any rate, so, and then of course, when we talk about the empires class, right now we're working on the Egyptian Empire, which, as you know, is really a hodgepodge, really. And we're trying to settle down on exactly the timing of the ancient empire. And so these are classes, as I say, they're ongoing. There's no prerequisite to the class, like you had to learn what we learned last week. This is why you can join in and you can join the conversation and see how it goes, right? Okay, that's through cepheracademy.net. We are going to have some wonderful surprises coming up on cepher.net too. We've got another, I think, a real beautiful thing that's going to follow the large print flexible bind. That's going to come right in right after that. So keep your eyes open for that. All right, so tonight, Cepher Moments to Everything. And of course, this is going to be taken from the Cepher Millennium Edition. To everything, there is a season and a time to every purpose under heavens. Now, this is from Kohelet, Ecclesiastes 3:1. All right, let me join the conversation here. I'll stick my big nose into the middle of the mix here. And that way I can make comments and you guys can see that it's actually me talking and not my AI clone counterpart. They talk about a waste of money, but that would be a waste of money right there. Okay. I'll say Kohelet, the preacher, Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. So to everything, there is a season. Well, what is a season? That's a question for us, right? Well, in this case, we have a particularized word. And it is not Moedim like you see in Genesis 1:14, but rather it's the word Zeman, Zeman. And Zeman here is from H2163, and it means an appointed occasion, a season or a time. You could even say an appointed time, an appointed time. Okay. And it comes from Zaman, which is the primitive root, meaning to what? Fix a time. So one's the verb, the other is a noun, right? One's a verb, the other is a noun. And so we can see that one is to fix an appointed time. The other one is to have an appointed occasion. See, to everything, there is an appointed occasion. There is an appointed time. This would be another way of Solomon saying this. To everything, there is an appointed time that it's going to happen. All right. Well, as he talks about that, let's see, we often hear statements like, well, he or she died prematurely, to give you an example. But is that really so? There is an appointed time to be born, an appointed time to die, an appointed time to sow, an appointed time to reap. Now, just as it is certain that you must sow, at least for us who are, not be able to grow winter crops, there's an appointed time to sow in the spring, and there's an appointed time to reap at the end of the agricultural cycle, which is a time to harvest. That's an appointed time. And similarly, when we're born, no one can fix the hour of our birth, right? Our soul enters into the flesh, enters into a body. And when our soul enters into that body, hey, guess what? We're on the earth. And when we come to the earth, here we are. Yah has placed us in the flesh, in the test, on earth at an appointed time. Similarly, we have an appointed time that is our death. And as Isaiah says, as you cannot add one or take away one hair in your head, similarly, you cannot add 1 nanosecond to your life other than the appointed time that Yah has for you. Now, for a lot of people, this is a difficult equation because, you want to say to yourself, well, look, I feel responsible for the death of so-and-so and so-and-so. When it comes to dying, it is really in the hands of Yah, and he knows the hour of our death. He knows the hour of our death. And so as a consequence, we should not be pushing ourselves over the top, worrying about what our commitment was or what happened, or so on and so forth. Instead, what we need to do is we need to just recognize that when we lose a loved one, it is their hour of their appointed time, the minute that Yah had predisposed for them in the heavens. Okay. So he or she died prematurely? No, he or she died at exactly the time Yah intended. Okay. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. And Yahweh smelled a sweet savor, and Yahweh said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite everything living as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. The appointed time for seeding, the appointed time for the harvest, the appointed time for cold weather, the appointed time for hot weather, the appointed time for summer, the appointed time for winter, the appointed time for day, and the appointed time for night shall not cease. And neither will the time to be born and the time to die. To everything there is a season. Therefore he said to them, the harvest is truly great, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore to El Yahweh of the harvest that he would send laborers into his harvest. Go your ways, and behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. And so here we see that there is a harvest time that is also in the harvesting of souls. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You guys are mentioning the song by the Byrds, "To Everything Turn, Turn, Turn." Beautiful song that the Byrds did when they first started out. Harmonies are wonderful. The guitars ring and clang. It's beautiful, you know. And I was thinking about that song, but that is what really inspired me on this particular passage. There's something about this passage, "To everything there is a season," that just struck me as, ringing true. Man truly is but a seed, and the Ruach set for harvest. And out of the Gospel of Matithyahu, the Besarab Matithyahu, another parable he put forth to them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is likened to a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade had sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servant of the house came and said unto him, Adonai, did you not sow good seed in your field? From whence then has it tares?" And he said to them, "An enemy has done this." The servant said to him, "Will you then that we go and gather them up?" But he said, "Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up the wheat also with them. Let both grow up together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather you together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them. But gather the wheat into my barn. But at the time of the harvest, we will see that there shall be a gathering of the tares first, and the wheat second. To everything. And yet another appointment waits. And as it is appointed to men once to die, but after this, the judgment, so Mashiach was once offered to bear the sins of many. And to those who look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. Let's look at that a little closer. So to kill here is not racha, like you see in the commandment, thou shalt not kill, racha. But rather, this is harag. And so, yes, on one hand, it can mean to kill, but it really means to smite with a deadly intent. A time to strike with the purposes of destroying is kind of a better way to understand harag. And then a time to heal. Well, what is the word? Rapha, of course. Rapha. Yahweh Rapha, right? The Elohim of healing. Yahweh Rapha. A primitive root, meaning to mend by stitching, i.e. figuratively to cure or to heal, right? A time to destroy and a time to heal. Now, I can tell you when we talk about this, let's look at this for just a minute. You know, up here we have a lot of things going on in the Alaskan wilderness. And for instance, when someone wants to buy a piece of property and develop it so that they can put a house there, well, there's a lot of destruction that's going to go on. You might go in with the idea of smiting the trees with a chainsaw, to take down the trees with a chainsaw and harvest all of this. And really, this is one practice where you would take down, for instance, the large birch, the large spruce, the large cottonwood or willows, the large alder. You're going to take these trees down. And when you take these trees down, you might have enough to potentially build a house. You might have enough to build a fence. You might have, it may be just used for firewood, but you may want to harvest that initially with a chainsaw. Take that lumber and stack it, but you're going to smite it with a chainsaw, smite it with an axe. You're going to destroy it. Then you're going to bring in your track hoe, and your track hoe, you're going to pull all those stumps. You're going to gather all that stuff, and you're going to burn it in a fire. And what was once a placid wilderness where the moose like to play becomes a flattened dirt stretch. Maybe it's soaking wet, muddy, kind of ugly, and it's filled up with heaps of what used to be standing timber, standing brush. And then these heaps are set on fire and they burn, and you burn away this ground that you've just cleared. Now the ground is all cleared, and then you bring in you might bring in a D6 cat or something like this, where you can blade the ground and flatten it and flatten it and flatten it and flatten it until you get it in at a place where it's prepared. Now, once the ground is flat and in good shape, now you might decide you're going to build. You're going to build up. And when you go to build up, you're going to build up by maybe you put in a septic tank, maybe you put in a well, maybe you put in gas line, maybe you put in electric line, all of these things, maybe you put in a foundation for your house. All of these things are the beginning of the building. And then when it's completed, well, you've got a house and you've got a garage and you've got a yard and you've got a fenced in area and so on and so forth. And it turns out that it becomes a thing of beauty, but it's a different kind of beauty. It's an organized beauty that has been built up over that which was broken down. It heals that which was destroyed. Now, when we talk about breakdown and build up, let's take a look at that for a minute, because that also has some meaning. This I found very interesting. To break down is the word parats, parats. Now, this is interesting, and hey, it gives me a chance to use a little bit of some drawing here. So parats here, parats. Oh, wait a minute, let's get a different, better color. Let's use red here. Parats. This means, this is H6555, and it's a primitive root, meaning to break out or to break away, right? A time to break out, a time to break away. Now, if you look at that spelling, you can see Pei, Resh, Sadi. And here we see also Pei, Resh, Sadi. The difference being, of course, that we have a different set of nikudot between this Pei, Resh, Sadi and this Pei, Resh, Sadi, Sofi, actually. Okay, so what is this word? Well, this is Peretz. And Peretz is who? The brother of Sirach, and his name means what? To break out. To break out. See that? Peretz, to break out or to break down. Yeah. And then, of course, to build up is bana. Bana. A primitive root meaning to build. Now, keep in mind, just one little thing while we're here, a little Hebrew tip on this. Remember that in Hebrew, the accent is on the ultimate syllable. So, bana. The exception is when you have something like this here, where you have two singles in a row, in which case it's peretz. It's on the penultimate syllable, which would be this one. Here's the penultimate. Here's the ultimate. So the accent is going to be here on the penultimate syllable because of the eh sound that you find repeated in both the first syllable and the second syllable, meaning that the accent like melek or derek or peretz is going to be on the penultimate symbol and not the penultimate syllable and not the ultimate syllable. See, here we have that zeh sound here in the beginning, but because the last vowel is ah, zerach, that means the accent is here on the second part of the syllable. Okay? All right. A time to cast away stones. and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to guard and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. Now let's talk about some of these ideas. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. Now you may cast away stones, for instance, if you're clearing a patch of soil that you're going to use for gardening. You would see examples of this in Ireland really significantly, where the stones were prolific. And so many of the Irish who were given a very small plot of land upon which to live following the time of Oliver Cromwell, and told, whatever land you used to own here, you don't own anymore. You own this little plot here. And actually, you don't own it. It's going to be owned by the landowner, but you get to live here. And you're going to have to eat whatever you can grow on this little plot. Maybe it's a quarter acre. Maybe it's a half acre. But on that plot, you find so many stones. How could you possibly grow in anything like this? And so they would take the stones and they would gather them, and then they would use the stones to build a stone wall around the edge of the property. And so you can see that almost all of the property in Ireland where that has had any farming whatsoever has been walled in with stone walls. And most of those rocks that were taken to build those stone walls were taken from the garden area, these big stones that had to be single-handedly carried up and stacked, carried up and stacked, carried up and stacked, so that you would end up with enough topsoil that you could actually, hoe it. You could actually put in furrows where you could actually grow food. And you could imagine that if there is no Shabbat practiced, which there was no Shabbat practiced on this soil following Oliver Cromwell's destruction. And so as a consequence, when we get some 21 years into the destruction of following Cromwell's persecution of the Catholic Irish, that you're going to see that the failure to keep a Shabbat of the land is going to cause blight to occur in the potatoes. Now, even though there was plenty of food in Ireland in 1847, but the British removed the food because the food was being harvested for sale in the markets of Britain. It was not being harvested to feed the poor Irish. And the Irish were told, eat the potatoes that come out of your own plot. And all the food that was grown in Ireland was shipped into Britain. And the Irish were left with potatoes which were suffering blight as a result of the land laying itself fallow for a 3-year period because the Sabbath had not been kept for the 21 years prior. And this resulted in a huge famine in Ireland. And it was one thing for 1847 for the 1847 crop to fail. But when the 1848 crop failed even greater than the 1847 crop did, the people began to starve to death. And you can see in Ireland, you can see this really quite common, that there's mock-ups of the famine ships, for instance, that are parked on the River Liffey in Dublin. There are statues of famine families moving in Cork and also in Dublin. And, I stood on the dock there at the Shannon River looking out at Scattery Island. And Mary was telling us right from that very dock, you could look out into the river quite wide, quite deep, and very fast. She said it was right here that many of the famine ships would leave port and they'd sink right there with everybody on them. And there were, about 25% of the people that left on famine ships died en route to where they were going, and they shipped all over the world, mostly to North America and to Canada, the United States, but also to Australia and New Zealand. And it was a very difficult time for the Irish. But the idea of casting away stones, you might want to cast those stones out of your garden to make room. But then again, you might gather those stones together to build yourself a wall, to build yourself a chimney, to build yourself a rock foundation, right? A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. I haven't seen you in such a long time. Time to embrace. Oh, you have fallen away from the faith and you have declared me to be your enemy. Maybe not a time to embrace. Or we've been hit by a storm. We're a ship at sea. The waves are coming over the gunwale. There's no time to embrace. It's time to get to work. Okay. A time to get and a time to lose. Now, many of you are in my age, maybe younger, maybe a little older, but some of us have lost everything. And sometimes we've lost everything more than once. And Yah has seen fit to recover us in his own good measure. But when you obtain, when things come to you, that is an appropriate time to give thanks to Yah for his blessing. And when you lose all these things, it is also a time to give thanks to Yah, because maybe he doesn't want you to have all that stuff. That's really a good idea too, right? A time to guard and a time not to guard. Well, I was going to guard this stuff, but you know what? This stuff is all junk. I think I'm going to throw it in the dumpster. Good idea. How much did you spend on the security feature over your storage space? And then you get there 5 years later of stuff you've never touched for 5 years, haven't seen it. You don't even remember what's in your storage space. Then you get there and go, hey, why did I save this? Then it goes into the dumpster where it should have gone before the first time. In fact, if you'd given it away, you would have done better than you throwing it in a dumpster. A time to rend, a time to rip the garment, and a time to sew the garment. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time of love, a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. When is a good time to cast away stones? Well, and the scribes and the Peretzim brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Rabbi, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moshe in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? This they said, tempting him that they might have an accusation against him. But Yahusha stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he had not heard them. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said to them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even to the last. And Yahusha was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When is a good time to cast away stones? When you are convicted in your own conscience. When you're ready to throw stones at someone to destroy them. When you're ready to denounce, repudiate, harm, kill, destroy, damage someone, whether you're doing it physically, metaphysically, emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually, that's probably a pretty good time to become convicted in your own conscience and recognize that before you stone someone for having a speck in their eye, you might want to get the plank out of your own eye. Then said he to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, O you offspring of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Bring forth, therefore, fruits worthy of repentance, and do not begin to say within yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. For I say to you that Elohim is able to, of these stones, raise up children to Abraham. When is it appropriate to gather stones? When Elohim decides that he's going to raise up stones to be the children of Abraham. Yes, indeed. The stones of the temple made without hands. Hallelujah. As for the command as to silence, consider the following. Now, this is a little bit more lengthy passage, but when I read this passage, I thought this is going to be a good time to talk about this passage. So I'm going to drop it here. For thus says, this is from the book of Amos or Amos. For thus says Yahweh to the house of Yasharel, seek me and you shall live. But seek not Beit El, nor enter into Gilgal, and pass not to Beersheba. For Gilgal shall surely go into captivity, and Beit El shall come to naught. Seek Yahweh, and you shall live, lest he break out like a fire in the house of Yosef, and devour it, and there be none to quench it, in Beit El. Okay, so here you have a very express passage. Seek Yahweh while you shall live, and you shall live, lest he break out like a fire in the house of Yosef. You who turn judgment to wormwood and leave off righteousness in the earth. Seek him that makes the 7 stars and Orion, and turns the shadow of death into the morning, and makes the day dark with night, that calls for the waters of the sea and pours them upon the face of the earth. Yahweh is his name, that strengthens the spoiled against the strong, so that the spoiled shall come against the fortress. Okay, very, very interesting, because here you see, we have something here, the 7 stars. Seven stars. And Orion. Well, that's fascinating, because the 7 stars would be the Pleiades. However, that 7th star was not known to astronomers in the modern world until the Japanese invented the telescope called Subaru in the 1920s. And Subaru discovered the 7th star. And when they found the 7th star, well, it's in the same pattern as the 7 churches in the book of Revelation that are clustered in the Anatolian Peninsula, right? The 7 stars are the 7 angels of the 7 churches. And these 7 stars happen to have the same geographic pattern in the heavens as they do on Earth. And that's the Pleiades. Not known to us, but known to the ancient world as having 7 stars. And Orion. And he turns the shadow of death into the morning and makes the day dark with night. It calls for the waters of the earth and pours them upon the face of the deep. Yahweh is his name, that strengthens the spoiled against the strong, so that the spoiled shall come against the fortress. They hate him who rebukes in the gate, and they abhor him that speaks uprightly. They try to censor him. They shadow block him. They have fact checkers come out and boot certain things off YouTube. They close you down. They kick you off Twitter. They shut down TikTok. Yeah. For as much, therefore, as your treading is upon the poor, and you take from him burdens of wheat, you have built houses of hewn stone, but you shall not dwell in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink the wine of them. For I know your manifold transgressions and your mighty sins. They afflict the just, they take a bribe, and they turn aside the poor in the gate from their right. Well, I can tell you that this is really quite astounding, that you can have this passage in Amos saying that these people who are taking bribes, that are afflicting the just in order to give license to the unjust, that are favoring the inside group at the expense of those who are law-abiding and taxpayers, and turning aside the poor from their due right. Oh, well, you're too poor to even be able to fight for it. We're just going to take it from you. What are you going to do? You're too poor. Go be homeless. Go get some fentanyl. Die in the street. What's going to happen to them? They're going to end up building houses of hewn stone, but not living in them. They will plant vineyards, beautiful vineyards, but they'll not drink the wine of them, because Yah is going to take it away from them. Therefore, the prudent shall keep silence in that time, for it is an evil time. Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so Yahweh, the Elai, Sevaot, shall be with you as you have spoken. Hate the evil and love the good, and establish judgment in the gate. It may be that Yahweh Elai Sevaot will be gracious to the remnant. of Yosef. A time to keep silence. When is the time to keep silence? In an evil time. A time to speak, a time to be silent, a time to love, and a time to hate. And you can see here when we talk about that, we have this here. Well, when's a good time to hate? Well, right here. Hate the evil. Hate things that are evil. And love the good. That's what you're instructed to do. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. Seems we've been at war during all of my lifetime. I mean, I was born during the Korean conflict, but they didn't want to call it war, where 5 million Korean civilians died during that war. The war in Vietnam, where 3 million Vietnamese civilians died during that war and after. The battle in Grenada, the conflict in Panama, where George H.W. Bush had to get Manuel Noriega out of power before he blabbed on the whole cocaine syndicate that was going on between Colombia, Panama, and Mena, Arkansas. The first Gulf War, trumped up and created by the State Department. The war on terror as a result of the attack of 9/11. We won't get into that. The war in Afghanistan, even though the war in Afghanistan had nothing to do with the attack on the Twin Towers, we elected, even though the claim was made in the press that the Twin Towers were attacked by 19 terrorists, 13 of which were Saudis, we attacked Afghanistan and Iraq. Yeah, I don't know. It strikes me the propaganda doesn't make sense at that point. Then the second Gulf War that was brought on by weapons of mass destruction, which of course were never found. The bombing of the Balkans by Bill Clinton did that to take the heat off the Monica Lewinsky story. And so we gave them, humanitarian aid to Yugoslavia. That's dropping bombs from 60,000 feet with no ground troops. The bombing of Libya, where we killed Gaddafi and targeted his grandchildren in order to steal the Libyan gold and keep it from putting a currency together that was gold-backed. The bombing of Syria. And why we bombed Syria? Yeah, I don't know. Hey, let's make up a story about Syria. Okay. They're using chemical weapons against their own people. And then you show, a CIA paid op shooting a bottle of Clorox over a wall, trying to call that a chemical weapon. But that didn't stop us from lobbing in cruise missiles, blowing up Damascus, and turning sections of Syria into an absolute total nightmare, where the cities have been totally and completely destroyed. And Bashar al-Assad, I'm trying to remember when he attacked us or when he even criticized us. For all I know, Bashar al-Assad was minding his own business, governing a diversified country that allowed Jews, Christians, and Muslims to live together in the same country on an equal status. Well, I guess that's why we have to bomb him. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, and now we have Ukraine and Palestine. No sooner did Joe Biden do a humiliating evacuation off the embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, then all of a sudden now we got this war going on in Ukraine. And, for those of you who want to talk about this, we might get into it a little bit more here tonight. We got time. The war in Ukraine is escalating now to a point where it is certain to come to a confrontation between Russia and America. It's certain now. In fact, today, Joe Biden announced that Ukrainians can use all the American weapons to shoot any target they want in Russia. Well, that's quite a step. It's like we say whatever is necessary to get us to World War III. So where is the season of peace? Right? Bless the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of Elohim, Matthew 5:9. And how about this passage out of Luke? Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consult whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him that comes against him with 20,000. That's the first rule of warfare, by the way. The first rule of warfare is count how many is in your neighbor's army and then count how many you have. That will give you a very sobering idea about what's going to happen. Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an ambassage and desires conditions of peace. Yeah, if you know you're going to lose, how about figuring out a way to negotiate peace? That'd be an idea, something to think about. Okay. Where is the season of peace? Well, here it is written. Rejoice in Yahweh always. And again, I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known to all men. Yah is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to Elohim. And the peace of Elohim, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Mashiach Yahusha. And what is the future in peace? And he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Yaakov, come you, and let us walk in the light of Yahweh. Yeshayahu 2, verse 4 and 5. Okay, that includes our presentation today. To everything, there is a season. Okay, so let's see if we've got any comments or some other discussion in the chat, and I will try to answer questions or otherwise field topics of discussion. Okay. Safia, let Yosef ask the question, what is Bashar doing today? Well, Bashar al-Assad today actually was meeting with the Ayatollah Khamenei in Iran and having a discussion about what is taking place in the Levant, in the Middle East. You might recall that Syria is a near neighbor to Israel. In fact, Israel is occupying ground that is technically Syrian territory, namely the Golan Heights. And so you have, if you talk about Israel's neighbors, you have Lebanon immediately to the north, Syria to the north and northwest, Jordan to the immediate east, and Egypt to the southwest. And you can also see that it blooms out from around there. Beyond Syria is Turkey and Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and beyond those is Kuwait and the Gulf Emirates, the Emirate states, and so on and so forth, and then Iran. And beyond Egypt, Algeria, Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. All of these nations are now turning very strongly against Israel. And of course, Yemen, which is at the bottom of the Saudi Peninsula, today struck a Greek ship, almost sinking it. And so the Houthis have become very, very structurally sound in terms of them being able to shut down the Red Sea. Okay, so Crazy, yeah, is there anywhere I can ask you something in private? Yeah, you can send me an email if you want to Stephen@Cepher.net, Stephen@Cepher.net. Okay, and then you'd be able to reach me. Okay, all right. Let's see. How can this group be praying for me? Oh, well, thank you, Ashton. I really appreciate that. Yeah, brother. I mean, I do appreciate prayer. The work that we do is always subject to censorship. It's always subject to quote unquote fact checkers. And of course, whatever label they want to put on us. And I pray actually that I'm invisible to my enemies. That's one of my prayers. That I would be invisible and remain invisible to them. They just wouldn't know who I am. and that we have this discussion where we can talk here in a fairly candid way without people going nuts, right? So I appreciate that, Ashton. And then pray as you're led. When the Ruach convicts you, let that prayer be for you, whatever the Ruach leads you to pray for. I think that's inappropriate. And okay, so now Amanda Grace, and thank you, speaking the truth. Amanda Grace says, what is a proper response to a draft? And I'm assuming you're talking about conscription. And conscription is one where the government essentially kidnaps you, and then they put you to go fight a war. And there used to be what's called a conscientious objector status, which you could conscientiously object. And sometimes that means that you end up and you still end up in the military, but you're in a non-combat situation, such for instance as medical support, administrative support, something like this. The other alternative was to go to jail for 2 years, which I think Muhammad Ali took that option. He went to prison for 2 years rather than go to fight in Vietnam. And so there are some things now. What if you're asking the question morally? What is the moral position to a draft? Well, I think in this particular case, most of the people I know, including a lot of military veterans, no longer have any confidence or faith whatsoever in the American military or its casus belli to be fighting anywhere in the world. And when you see the U.S. administration openly aiding and abetting genocide in multiple locations and bragging about it, you may not want to participate in the slaughter of women and children, for instance. Or you may not want to be, slaughtering women and children at My Lai in Vietnam. You may not want to be in a situation where you're going to experience all the tragedy that goes on with killing somebody else when you're in a combat situation, when they didn't need to die, and except the only reason you're fighting is because a bank needs to make more money, or a military industrial contractor wants to get paid back on his defense loans, or something like this. So to make profit for certain corporations that are corrupt, that have been doing everything they possibly can to take away your right to speech, take away your right to read scripture, take away your right to gather and praise and worship Yah, take away your right to self-defense, and to steal every bit of property you have as they covet and lust ever over every last penny in your pocket, you might not want to fight to the death for them. You might say to them, you guys do not entertain me at all. And so you might feel morally convicted to do everything possible to resist the draft. I mean, if I were in Ukraine, I would certainly resist that draft. Absolutely, I would resist it. There'd be no way that I would be fighting on that front for Vladimir Zelensky. No way. It wouldn't happen. I would have been out of there a long time ago. Okay, so Joy Rittman writes, Shalom, Dr. P, and to our Cepher family. So great for all your prayers. Hey, you bet, Joy. I'm hoping you're feeling a lot better now. I still have a lot of pain. Oh, yeah. Well, I hope that pain starts to mitigate, Joy, and that you're just going to be moving towards 100% here very, very quickly. Hallelujah. Okay. Okay, crazy. I'll look forward to your private communication. Let's see. Yeah. Chad says, I look forward to the day when I can love my neighbor without the adversary drumming up endless wars. Chad, amen, amen, and on the button. I'm so sick and tired of these wars being drummed up in order for, Raytheon or GE or, whoever it is. Well, look, we got to make money on these bombs, I joined the army so I can get ribbons on my chest. Where's my war? Well, I need a war here. Let's fight, pick a fight with somebody. They can't stomach peace. They can't handle it. They don't like it. And so as a result, they go out and do false flags, whatever they can take in order to get into a war so they can steal other people's stuff. That's the bottom line. They want to steal other people's stuff. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's see here. By the way, Sherry Slama, thanks for your comments. And let's see if you have time, the Decapolis, the relationship to the 10 cities or the 10 talents. Oh, yeah. That's a good idea, Mark Callie. That's a good idea. And I will have to do that to talk about I haven't talked about this, I don't think ever before, about talking about the tenfold doctrine found within Scripture. But that's a very good topic to be covering. And I'll have to think about that. Okay, let's see what else. Why is Elohim plural? Okay, somebody asked the question. 73 Marbrand asked the question, why is Elohim plural? Okay, and look, you're the one who asked the question. So now we have to go in and whiteboard, right? We all love the whiteboard, so let's get in and do the whiteboard. All right. Let me get in here, Tindy. Whiteboard, where are you? Okay. More work, less clicks. Yeah, right. Okay, let's see. Okay, I want to share this whiteboard. Okay, let's share it. Okay. Okay. All right, share it with the project. Yeah, let's just share it with, okay, whatever. Let's see if you guys can see it. Okay, all right. Can you guys see the whiteboard? Let me see if I get a comment on that. If you can see the whiteboard first. Anybody see the whiteboard? Let me know if you can see the whiteboard. Let's see. Whiteboard. Okay, all right, here we go. Can you see it, Sherry? I hope you can. All right. So let me get back into the whiteboard and we're going to talk about Elohim because it was brought up. Okay. So what we see in the word, let's put it out here in the Ivrit. Okay. So we have, now this is the way it is spelled. And so most people say, well, it has the Yod Mem Safit ending here. So therefore, this ending here, the suffix here is what? It is a masculine plural. Masculine plural. Okay. Therefore, this must mean the gods, the Zechariah Sitchin's, understanding of it. Okay. But really it doesn't. And I'll show you why. Because number one, there could be a hyphen here because this is the ale, the Aleph Lamed. Technically, it's pronounced ale, like, a fine medieval mead, an ale, right? It's pronounced ale. And then you have this part here. Now, there is no O, right? If you look at this, no O. And for that matter, no oo, because ain't no vowel in here. There's no vowel there. Okay, that vowel was added by the Masoretes. Masoretes came in and said, you know what? I'm thinking that we need a vowel here. So what do you think we do this? Hey, now we got it. Elohim. What do you think? Oh, I don't know. I don't like that vowel. I think maybe that what we should do is put that vowel in a different place. Where do you got mine? Well, let's put it here. Elohim. Well, I don't want to break the news to you, but there is no vowel there. And because there's no vowel there, you get an interesting concept. So let me tell you what the concept is. The concept is this. We see some interesting things here. And one is that you have here is the Aleph, and this can be structured to mean the singular authority. You might think of it as the Father, the ultimate authority. Then the next thing you have is you have Lamed, not lamed, but Lamed. And Lamed is the what? Shepherd's staff. It's the shepherd's staff. So you might think of this as the shepherd, and in this particular case, the good shepherd, therefore, the son. All right. And then that leaves what? The He. Now, the He oftentimes represents the Ruach HaKodesh. For instance, when Avram becomes Avraham, the He is added to his name because he's imbued with the Ruach. When Sarai becomes Sarah, the He is added to her name because she's imbued with the Ruach. So the He, we can understand this as Ah, Okay, I'm gonna have to use this here. Ah, and this is the ruach. So when we look at this word, the plural aspect of this word is here. Singular, plural. So when you say there's a masculine plural here, true, but it's talking about the plurality of the ruach. So we can see, for instance, that since we're doing that, take some of this out of here. The ruach this is the ruach, and it starts out with the ruach yahweh and the ruach bina, the ruach of understanding, and the ruach da'at, the ruach of knowledge, and the ruach etzah, the ruach of counsel, and the ruach. Let's see, bina. Oh, wait a minute, I misspelled bina. And the ruach hokmah, or the spirit of wisdom, and the ruach yevarah, the spirit of strength, and the ruach yirah, or reverence or fear of Yah. All of these are given in Isaiah 11:2. Isaiah 11:2. Plural to hayim. Singular as to El. Okay. Now the reason I'm sharing that with you is because, of course, the kind of misunderstanding when you talk about Elohim, do not be myopic and think that gee, Elohim, that is obviously a plural word, therefore it must be gods. That really is a kind of a surface look without understanding what's going on there. Okay, let's see. All right, so we have something here. Joy Rittman asks, what about Trump's verdict? Well, Trump was convicted by a jury on all the counts. Now, I can tell you, I have lost all faith in the jury system in the United States because juries do not do their duty at all. And basically, when the jury came back and said, "Can you give me the judge's instructions again?" The judge is telling them, they don't say it explicitly, but the judge tells the jury, "You do what I tell you to do. You don't do what these lawyers tell you to do. You do what I tell you to do. And here's the jury instructions. And by the time you're done, you know, you're basically been told by the judge, you're going to find this guy guilty, period. That's what's going to happen. Because they do not represent a fairness in the trial. So jury trials are, and even though there is such a thing as jury nullification, don't count on jury nullification at any time because juries are almost completely spineless. There aren't any of them that want to stand up. Very few of them do the Lee J. Cobb job that you saw on 12 Angry Men. They just don't do that. They roll over and play dead. They read the instructions. They find a foreman. And then they go, well, what do you think? Well, now's our opportunity to legally smash somebody that we don't like. And it may be somebody that they think committed a crime, or maybe there's something else, but they have an opportunity to hurt someone and get away with it, whether it's the death penalty or putting them in prison or destroying their life. And a lot of juries take advantage of that. That's one reason, because people want to be, the sadistic side of the jury comes out. And then the other thing is that juries are not going to steer away from the judge. They think if they do what the judge tells them to do, that if they're ever caught in that trial, the judge is going to remember them when they sat on the jury and did the right thing for the judge, which is absolute falsehood because none of it has anything to do with justice. However, the question is, did Trump do it? Well, did Trump do what? Again, I mean, I wasn't there for the factual side of this trial. But I can tell you, when you say if you're falsifying a business record, I mean, arguably, if his name was Donald John Trump and he signed the document Donald J. Trump, the J could be construed as falsifying a document. And I don't know exactly what the whole deal was. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's what I think about Trump's verdict. Okay. I think that, I'm not totally aware of the facts, but he got convicted by a jury, and I figured he would get convicted because the conviction rate in jury trials is like 96%, I think, in jury trials. It's that high of a rate. Well, you wouldn't be here if you wouldn't be on trial if you hadn't done something wrong. The idea of, gee, you're not guilty and you're innocent until proven guilty, forget it. The fact that there's reasonable doubt, forget it. That doesn't cross a jury's mind. You can sit there and present reasonable doubt all day long. That isn't going to mean anything to the jury. Nothing. And having somebody on a jury conscientious enough to go outside of this flowing stream, which is the Justice Center. Hey, look, listen, once you're caught up in the crosshairs of that stuff, you're on the train to Auschwitz. Okay. That's my opinion on it. All right. Okay. So Clifton James Kelly asked, what is special about the summer solstice? Well, nothing in particular is special about the summer solstice here at Clifton James Kelly, except that in the solar calendar, it's a marker. And, in the solar calendar, you have 4 markers initially. And you have the vernal equinox, you have the summer solstice, you have the autumnal equinox, and then you have the winter solstice. Those 4 markers create, by the way, the sign of the cross, an equilateral cross. Some people divide it even further, and they put another X on top of that cross to give you 8 points instead of 4. And those 8 points, by the way, are all occult holidays. I'm not going to get into those here, but that's what they are. Now, you compare that to a lunar calendar. The lunar calendar just gives you the moon, right? But when you have a solely lunar calendar, that's a different issue altogether. And so, yes, the vernal equinox is important. The winter solstice is important for marking the times and the seasons, but the moon is also important too. All right. All right, let's see what else. Okay, all right. So Shabbat will be coming up this Saturday. And I hope you guys are going to join us for that. Let's see. Hey, you bet, Sherry. I'm glad I can do the whiteboard. Let's see. In the trial, just a big theater show, though, Braided asks. Well, of course. I mean, look, the trial was done because, I mean, look, I've done a number of jury trials. And I mean, to give you an example, we did a jury trial on securities fraud. And the question was Reg D of the 33 Act violated in a private placement among accredited investors? All right, that was the question. And we were dealing with the jury. There wasn't anyone on the jury that had anything more than a high school degree. So guess what we had to do? We had to explain Reg D. We had to explain what the Securities Act was about. We had to talk about what is an accredited investor, what's an unaccredited investor. We had to talk about what is a safe harbor in an investment plan, all of these kinds of things. How do you think you get a fair jury out of that? So you walk in with a guy who's a billionaire who's got 500 pages of tax returns, and you say, oh, well, you fabricated your business documents. Well, first of all, probably my guess is Trump doesn't prepare any of those documents. They're all prepared by accountants. That would be my guess. Well, you signed it, didn't you? Well, I signed it, but you're talking about disposing of millions of dollars of debt in 500 pages of tax returns. Well, on page 63, it says here that this was a business expense to your attorney, but really wasn't it a hush payoff to a prostitute? And then it turns out that the lawyer was the one that paid the prostitute, not Trump. Well, Trump says, well, look, my lawyer bills me for paper clips, bills me for phone calls, bills me for, erasers for his whiteboard. You know what I mean? He bills me for all kinds of stuff. What do I know, right? And it doesn't matter. You signed that document, and because you didn't say on there hush money to pay off a prostitute, that's lying on your business form that he probably didn't even prepare, right? So technically, you might be able to reach that answer. You might be able to reach that answer technically, at least in terms of the liability. But I mean, how do you, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Trump, release your tax returns. Okay. Well, let's talk about accelerated cost recovery and depreciation. And let's talk about net operating losses that I've been carrying over for the last 17 years from 22 different corporations. You want to talk about NOLs for a while? Right? This is what we're going to discuss on people who get all of their news in one sentence in a soundbite, right? This is part of the reason why this stuff really just does not equate, right? Okay. Modern jury trial is not a valid jury, right? They're not peers, right? Peers uphold and support your weight. Yeah. They're not peers. I mean, when you talk about peers, you're talking about people of the same class, education, understanding of the world. And that's not what you get. I mean, was it a bunch of billionaires sitting on Trump's trial? No, no, it was not. Okay. Okay, Brother P, what if any is the difference between a Hebrew and Jewish? Hey, Pamela, that's a great question. So when you talk about Jewishness, you have to understand that with Jewishness, there's three ways that you could say, I'm of Yahudah. Okay, Yahudah. And one way is you were a citizen in the kingdom of Yahud. And the kingdom of Yahud was the kingdom of David, actually the kingdom of Rahavam, that appeared after the kingdom broke up into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Northern kingdom became Yitzrael. The southern kingdom became Yahud. And in the Roman, they would say Judea. You see it in kind of modern print as Judea. But in the Ivrit, it's Yahud. So if you were a part of that kingdom, then you were Yahudim. You were of Yahuda. You were Yahuda or Yahu, because you were a citizen of Yahud. And so you see Yeshayahu or Yirmiyahu or Obadyahu or Zakaryahu, all of the, Yoshiyahu, Yekiskiyahu, all of these were kings and people who were present and part of the kingdom of Yahud. And so they would take the name Yahu at the end to signify that citizenship. Now, that's one way to be a citizen of Yahud. That ended in 586 BC. There is no citizen of Yahud after that. So citizenship in Yahud is out of the question of the three possibilities. So now you have two other possibilities. One, you're a direct descendant of Yehuda. Or two, you are of the religion called Yahudism, Judaism. So when you talk about Jewish, you're talking about, and really, it's impossible to establish who are Yahudim. And I'll tell you why it's impossible to establish. When you look at Matthew 1, and this was something that we unfolded last Thursday night. When you look at Matthew 1, you can see that Yehuda, he had 5 sons. He had 5 sons. Now, the first three sons he had were Canaanite. They were half Canaanite. So it was him and these Canaanite sons. One's name was and he died because Yah killed him because he wouldn't touch Tamar. The second one was Onan, and he died because he did touch Tamar, but he wouldn't get her pregnant. And the third one was Shilach, who we don't know what happened to him. Shilach ventured off and married, we think, a Canaanite woman, and then went his merry way. So the line out of Shilach is not going to be a pure line of Yahudim. Now, even Yahuda, who then has a relationship with Tamar, and which, by the way, she was officially his daughter-in-law, and she solicited herself as a prostitute, and he paid her for that. Anyway, she gets pregnant with Peretz and Zerach. We looked at the name Peretz tonight. Peretz meaning to break away, He broke away. He broke down. He broke away. And so this means that he was not the firstborn. Zerach was the firstborn whose hand broke the matrix, red thread on the hand. The hand came back in. Peretz was born. He broke through. And so this is why he was called Peretz. And as Zerach, the two of these twins are born. Now, what happens to these twins? Well, we don't know, because we don't get any of the litany of the generations of Peretz until we get all the way to Boaz. Hetzron and all these other names that are given to us in Matthew 1. There's not a discussion about where they are and what they're doing. And furthermore, we get almost no discussion about Zerach. Here's the rock. Then we're told in Second Chronicles, here's his sons. His sons are critically important to the entire narrative of the earth. But what happens to Zarok? Who knows? We don't find out where he lived. We don't find out where he died. Why not? Because he had the red thread on his wrist. He was pushed into the wilderness as the scapegoat, as the scapegoat. And so there, when we talked about it last week, there's a chance that Peretz and Zarok were in fact the founders of the city of Rome, that in the Latin are called Romulus and Remus. Now, when you think about this for a minute, somebody pointed out to me in the comments there on the YouTube channel, they pointed out to me that, oh yeah, when you look at the Etruscan alphabet, there's a couple of alphabets that are really very critical. One is the Colburn alphabet that is found in ancient Wales, and the other is the Etruscan alphabet that was found up in the area they called Lombardia in northern Italy. Both of these alphabets are Paleo-Hebrew with extensions on them. In other words, they have more letters than the original Paleo-Hebrew, but they're Paleo-Hebrew in their basis. They've got the 22 letters of the Paleo in both of their alphabets, the Colburn and the Etruscan alphabet. What's the Paleo-Hebrew doing in the Italian peninsula? Well, it makes perfect sense that the Paleo-Ivrit would be in the Italian peninsula if, in fact, Peretz and Zarok were truly Romulus and Remus. Now, if this is the case, then what we see in the myth of Romulus and Remus is that the father of the twins put the mother away. She was cast into some temple to become a Vestal virgin. He never touched her again. Well, the scripture in Genesis says that Yehuda never touched Tamar again. But what happened to the twins? There's no discussion of him raising them, taking them out hunting and camping, showing them how to horseback ride, showing them how to shoot a bow and arrow, and then him blessing them at the end of his life. That doesn't exist in the scripture. Did he do what the myth talks about, putting the twins on a raft and sending them down the river and saying, enough of these twins, these aren't my kids, I don't want to see them again? Did that happen? And then also the myth that says they were raised by a wolf. There's many places, and in fact, they're believed there's 3 statues in Rome that show it wasn't a wolf, it was a hyena. It was a hyena. Now, if it was a hyena raising the boys, where'd that happen? So there's other indicia to believe that Zarok and Peretz founded Rome, because the children of Zarok would go on to found Athens. Calco would found Athens. Darda or Dardanus would form Troy, and Ethan would form the city of Cadiz, possibly Zaragoza, and possibly Carthage. Haman went on to populate Bulgaria and may be the progenitor of what they call the Furbolgs, who were also, ended up in Belgium. The Belgiae were Furbolgs and possibly Bulgars, and they also ended up in Ireland for some period of time. So when you see all of this, the only one who stayed behind was Zimri, and the Zimri is the only one we have any record of, and it was his grandson that violated the edict in Jericho and ended up being killed for doing so. So there's no narrative as to Zarok. So at any rate, when you talk about this idea of Yehuda, so if you can't follow Zarok's children, although I think we can now because we can follow his children's children and where they went, and you can't follow Peretz except through this line of kings that comes down when we finally get track of Boaz again, and then Jesse, and then David and Solomon and so forth. Other than that, unless you're in that line of kings of David and that immediate progeny, how do you claim that you're Yahudim? And even then, I mean, look, even 70 years after the collapse of the temple in 586 BC, they had great difficulty finding Levi'im. And most of the families they found that had come back into the land had married Canaanites and had married, all the people of the land around them, and they had crossed up marriages and interlineation between the races. So in terms of finding true Yahudim, the chances are not good. You might be able to find it in royal bloodlines, but that's about it. So who is a Jew today is someone who's of the Jewish religion, not Yehuda from the tribe of Yehuda, and not a citizen member of Yehud, but rather just of the Jewish religion. Now, when we talk about that, is there a specific race that clings to the Jewish religion more than other races? Well, this is a very interesting question, and I was forwarded a peer-reviewed research paper that was really quite good, looking at the question of is there a racial component, a consistent race component to the Ashkenazi Jews? And it turns out that there is a racial component, but the racial component is far different than what you might imagine, because they are primarily of a Greco-Roman stock that had come out with the Roman Empire, and when Rome was confronting the Germanic people trying to do a conquest over Germany, and they realized we're not going to get there, so they basically hung it up. These people would kind of forge together, and they would end up moving into this area that is now called Ukraine, but also the North Caucasus in Russia. In other words, it went all the way really from Lviv in Western Ukraine, all the way to Astrakhan on the North Caspian Sea in southern Russia, this whole area. And this became known as the Khazarian Empire. And in the 8th century, it converted to the Babylonian Talmud. Before that, they were just a bunch of reckless criminals. And then after that, they converted to the Babylonian Talmud. And this was the group of people that were living there were primarily Greco-Roman. However, there were other tribes present in Ukraine at the time that took place. There were still Bulgars that were still there. There were still Tubalini that were still there. And there were others. But the camp that would end up being really kind of residual Khazars, or really kind of hardcore Jews, they would move into the North Caucasus, and they would camp out, and the South Caucasus. One of those, of course, was Yosef Jugashvili, or Joseph Stalin. He was a Jew from northern Georgia, or an area called Ossetia, and from the town of Gori. So with this being said, now you can see that the Talmud now is going to have kind of a detonation. So they're practicing the Talmud as the best that they can understand it. And the fortunate thing of the Talmud comes with the Mishnah and the Gemara, so it's really quite an explicit directory. Here's how you do this, here's how you do that, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. Here's the rabbinic rabbis still arguing today in this particular passage, and they're still arguing today over here. And then you had something interesting emerge around 1200 with the Shem Tov. And Shem Tov came out and began to develop what's called rabbinical Judaism. And the rabbi would rise to a position of preeminence in the inside the practice. So the rabbi is essentially the god, if you will, of the particular tribe, of the particular group. And so the rabbis would then govern Judaism. Now, so those who came into Talmudism, who came into this Babylonian Talmud, and by this time, this is an evolved Talmud. It's not the Yerushalmi Talmud developed under Hillel and Shammai in 150 BC, but rather the Babylonian Talmud developed by Jews who had been taken captive into Babylon, and they had developed a more sophisticated, more at length Talmud that is going to be widely augmented by Maimonides in the 14th century, a Sephardi Jew out of Spain. Completely different group of people, by the way, the Sephardim. Completely different group of people. Okay, so the Ashkenazim now are going to be practicing this rabbinical Judaism, and this is going to become an art, if you will. And this art is the art of tradition, 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 right? And so the tradition comes to dominate inside Judaism, of the tradition of rabbinical authority and this tradition of the Talmud and the Gemara and so forth. And so that becomes a way of life that is not necessarily dependent upon a belief in a creator, but rather a belief in the tradition. And so Khazaria was eventually put asunder by the Orthodox out of Russia, said no more of this. And the Orthodox would eventually join with the Kievan Rus, and they, after defeating the Mongols, and they would form a united country. And then this group would expand widely. So when you talk about the difference between Jews and Hebrews are of the stock of Abru, and Abru was the great grandfather of Abraham. So it's Abru and Nahor, Terach, and Abraham. And Abraham called himself after Abru, which we say Hebrew, but it's Abru, and it's written in English as Aber, but it's not Aber. It's Aleph Beit Resh, Abru, Abru. And this is it. So when you're talking about being an heir of Abraham indeed, which is what Paul says about us, or a Yisraeli indeed, as Mashiach says about us, it is because of the true heirs of Abraham are those who believe, those who are who the true heirs of Abraham are. Because as we talked about tonight, Yah can raise up these stones as children of Abraham. So to say you are Hebrew is not to say you are Jewish at all. Now, a lot of times the Jewish engage in a form of dispensationalism, the same way that the Brits were doing under British Israelism, which is all 12 of the tribes are Jewish. No, that is simply absolutely inaccurate. All 12 of the tribes are not Jewish. And in fact, you cannot, this is a conflating the fact that a Jew is only a Jew because of his religion. There may be a long existing racial preference of those clinging to that religion, but they're not Yahudim per se. They're actually Greco-Roman who follow a Babylonian Talmud that didn't emerge until the 8th century AD. And that group is not Yahudim, but they call themselves Jews. But that doesn't make the tribe of Naphtali Jewish, or the tribe of Dan Jewish, or the tribe of Joseph Jewish, or the tribe of Ephraim Jewish, particularly if they've had no exposure to the Babylonian Talmud and don't believe it if they did. So they can't be Jewish. But to call every other tribe, oh, those people are all Jews. And these feast days that we see, those are all Jewish feasts. Hodgepodge. That's nonsense. So when you see the difference between a Hebrew, which is a child of Abraham, as compared to someone who says they're Jewish, the Jewishness depends upon the Talmud and its religion. Okay? All right. So let's see. So somebody says your thoughts on Iran's president. Yeah, well, there was a change in power in Iran. Now, I personally think that may have been not as accurate as you think. I mean, they may not be dead. That may have been a staged event. I don't know. But let's take it for face value and say it did happen. And if we're going to take it for face value, then we have two things happen. Either one, it was an accident, or two, they were shot down and they were killed. There's a good reason to believe they were shot down because they were carrying all the high-powered guys in that administration in a single chopper, and they were up near the Azerbaijani border where a C-140 gunship could have easily just swung over there and taken care of them, even from Azerbaijan airspace. And who would know, depending on how it was hit. But I can tell you that Iran is nonetheless contemplating a long throw war against Israel. It's a long throw war. And what's happening right now, one of the ways that the war is being successfully waged in the Muslim camp is being done by the Houthis, because the Houthis are sinking anything that gets near Israel. And they've been given weapons, we think they're probably Iranian weapons, Iranian missiles, that include Iranian drones and hypersonics and so on and so forth, that have a very extended range. So the Houthis can now target systems that are out, off the coast of Saudi Arabia. They can even target ships in the Mediterranean from South Yemen. And of course, any ship in the Red Sea is a sitting duck. So this means that all the transport that's coming from China that tries to get to Israel, or any other ship that tries to get to Israel, or any ship that's registered as an Israeli ship, the Houthis know what it is, and they do everything they can to sink it. So all the insurance companies have canceled all the insurance for any ship that wants to go walking up into the Red Sea. You're not insured if you do. So the Houthis are now a very, very dominant force, and they appear to be unstoppable. We had an aircraft carrier there trying to bomb them. We couldn't stop them. And so the Houthis are essentially unstoppable. And so they've proven to be so resilient that they're going to be the spearhead of this war, because what they're doing is they're depriving Israel of its economy. And the economy is what's going to kill Israel. Israel had an economic push going on, and all the billions floating in from the U.S. And all these billions that float in, okay, that works until then. Well, that money's gone. And then you're going to be like Ukraine. Can we get another 100 billion, please? And then here's Zelensky. Zelensky is that guy on the corner with a sign. I need money. Need money, need money. And soon that's going to be Netanyahu, the guy on the corner with a sign. We need money, because the Israeli economy is now in a free fall, plummet to the floor, as the whole world, with the exception of the U.S., finds Israel to be anathema, given their actions in Rafah. And the fact that their government now has arrest warrants for crimes of genocide puts a real black stain on what's going on in Israel. So the Houthis now can really wage the economic war against Israel by shooting down and stopping all shipping coming into any Israeli port. That's a big factor. Second factor, the Hamas has been gearing up into a hardcore guerrilla warfare in the Gaza, and they're waging a successful guerrilla war in the respect that they haven't been defeated yet. And as a consequence, it is causing the Israelis to do things, really exceptional things. For instance, if you're a general, for instance, you might say to yourself, all right, well, I've got to do what Zhukov did at Stalingrad, which is to surround the whole city in order to besiege the city so that no supply chain, so you can terminate the supply chain for anything coming into Gaza. That's how the Russians defeated Germans at Stalingrad. Okay, strategy that you might want to do. But if you do that strategy, in order to do it, they have to go along the Philadelphia corridor, which is at the border of Egypt and Gaza. And by putting tanks on that border, they completely vitiated and gutted the 1979 Camp David's Accord. So Camp David Accords. So as a result, Egypt has said, man, that's the end of Camp David. And as a result, there have been 2 Egyptian soldiers recently killed at the border. So you can look for a substantial troop buildup by Egypt along the Israeli border there, and which has the potential to put Israel at risk from a battle group coming out of Egypt and coming immediately over that border to attack Israeli forces, which means that in addition to fighting Hamas, you're also going to have to put in now a defensive position to look to whatever Egypt is going to do. And while you're doing that, Hezbollah is bombing everything from the north. In fact, Hezbollah hit targets today on the southern side of Mount Carmel. And for those of you who know the geography of Israel, Haifa, a beautiful city, in my opinion. I mean, I love Haifa, and Mount Carmel. I love Mount Carmel. That Druze city on Mount Carmel is beautiful. Spectacular people, those Druze. And but you have Mount Carmel running down into the Valley of Armageddon there. And Mount Carmel, in the face of it, is Haifa. And immediately on the southern side of Mount Carmel is all the high tech for Israel. This is where Intel and Microsoft and all these other places, they all have major office space right there on the southern side of Mount Carmel. Well, that was being hit by missiles today from Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, put a huge set of missiles into Kiryat Shimona, set the whole place on fire. I don't know what they've done to Safed. I haven't seen any of the war footage on that. But Hezbollah is using a structure that is used by Russia in Ukraine to defeat things like the Iron Dome and Patriot systems by using low-flying drones. All the wars are being done with drones now. So they're using low-flying, cheap drones to just blow up everything. And these things are quite effective at starting fires, and they're just toasting everything. And you can imagine when they develop a jet-powered drone that's only 18 inches long, what kind of capability that's going to have, not just rocket-powered, but jet-powered. So when you talk about what's going on with Iran's president, there is a new war cabinet that's being put in place. The Iranians have come out and announced, and this might be the reason why the Iranian president is dead. I think he's the one that announced it, that Iran does in fact have nuclear weapons. And the Atomic Energy Commission has confirmed that they have 300 times the amount of weapons grade uranium that they're supposed to have. So you can see that that's what's going on there. So the long and the short of it is that that's what's happening in that war front. And my expectation is that Israel is going to become very dependent economically, and there's going to be the amount of money that was going into Ukraine is going to start getting dumped into Israel. And if that's the situation, now you're talking, we're talking, $350 billion expenditure every quarter from a country that is currently running a $500 billion deficit a month. Yeah, this is going to get out of control. All right, let's see. Okay. Birdie Bear asked me, what's my opinion on the portrait? Well, look, sometimes Charles just can't hide it. He had all kinds of dark ceremonies at his coronation. The spirit of death walked by the front door at Westminster Abbey. The Baphomet does appear on that portrait. It's covered in red. It's very similar to the kind of portrait that Jacob Rothschild put together before he died. And it's a very open statement about their expectation as to where they're headed. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. I think that's about it. Okay, guys. So I want to thank you guys for being a part of this presentation today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll share it. And I hope you come and visit at all the various outlets we have going on for the Cepher group. Okay. All right. Blessings to you all, and we'll see you again next week.